All right. Hi, everybody. I am glad you're here with me today. We're going to dive into variables and conditions in Storyline today. So, if you've seen the other workshops I've done, sometimes we get kind of complex and we start using variables and conditions like everyone already knows what they are, but they can be pretty intimidating, especially if you're newer to the tool or newer to programming in general. So, my goal with this session is to give you a good intro to variables and conditions. So, maybe like an intermediate section or an intermediate session, we can call this, and then also, I think we'll have time at the end for questions so that we can get much more advanced if you'd like. So, I do have a link for you all to use to go ahead and download the file we're going to start with. Because we're not going to cover some more basic stuff in this, like how to add things to the slide or how to do formatting or anything like that. We are going to focus solely and primarily on variables and conditions. So go ahead and download that story file I just shared the Google Drive link with you if you're watching the replay on YouTube, because this will be on YouTube if you want to just watch now and then follow along later. This link will be in the description in YouTube. Okay, so do we all have that file open? Are we ready to dive into this? Okay, so variables and conditions, I should say, are like they're a good way to personalize the learning experience. So each variable can hold like some dynamic data about the experience, and then we can then either display that data back to the user or like take certain actions in the course based on the that variable's value. And you'll see exactly what I mean. But let me show you what we'll do. So first we're going to ask the user if they would like help navigating the learning experience. If they say yes, then we're going to show them these little tooltips like you see here. If they say no, then we're not going to show them these little tooltips. Okay, so that's one way we can personalize it. We'll also ask them their name. This is a classic, yeah, how to insert a name back and reference the user by their name. Many of you may be familiar with that. And then this is another simple abbreviated. I think we did this in another workshop, but how confident are you with variables? Based on how confident the user is, which number they select here, we can show them either like a tough question or a review question later on in the learning experience. Okay, so this is just going to be a quick intro. I'm going to show you how we can use true and false variables, text variables, and number variables. That's why we have this spread of three. So the first thing we should probably look at is the variable manager here. So notice on the right side of the screen, it's a part of the triggers panel over here on the right. We can select this little icon. It's kind of like a window with an X in it. Okay, so let's click on that. And this is our variable manager. So notice there are two tabs here. There's the project tab and the built-in tab. So the project tab, these are all of the variables that we create that are specific to our project. You'll notice there's a text entry one here already. That's because we added a text entry box to one of those slides where we're asking the user for their name. Let me show you. So whenever you create a text entry box like this, and if you are brand new to that, you do that by going to the Insert tab, Input, and then selecting Data Entry. And you can either do a text entry field or a numeric entry field. When you do that, it's going to automatically add a variable named text entry. Okay, so that's that. But you can also create new variables from scratch using this plus icon right here. Create a new variable. So we'll look at we're going to have to do that in this project, and we'll get there. There's also this built-in tab though. Most of the time you're not really going to be playing around with this, but Storyline makes these accessible to you in case you want to show this data or use this data in your learning experience. So maybe we should take a look at one of these. Um, Let's see, like project total slides. Do you see that project dot total slides? This built-in variable. If we wanted to display the total number of slides in our project, we could reference this variable on the screen. Okay, and let me show you what I mean by that. Notice this is project called project dot total slides, and capitalization is very important when it comes to variables. But if we want to display a variable's value, like this should be equal to 6 because you see we have 6 slides in our project. So project.total slide should be equal to 6. I'm just going to go to this home screen here. I'm going to insert a text box. I'm going to say like total slides and then a colon. Now, remember that variable is called project.total slides. If I preview this right now, it's just going to be plain text. But if I know that this is the name of a variable, if I enclose that within these percentage signs, it's going to display the value of that variable. Do you see how that just happened? So this is a recent storyline update where when you're in this slide view where you're actually editing the slide, it actually shows that value for you. Okay. So, and it's just percentage signs. So I'll show you that again. Project.total slides. And then all we do is we put a percentage sign after it. And as soon as I put this percentage sign before it, it's going to convert to a value. Well, when I click out of it, let's see. Here we go. It's equal to 6. Okay, so this is very important because this is what you'll use um, to troubleshoot variables. So when you're working with variables, you'll put little references like this on the screen a lot just to see, are these variables changing values like they're supposed to, like I need for my project. So I just wanted to show you how you do that. It's very easy to get it to display. All you need to do is use percentage signs. Okay, so let's delete those. Um, so here's an example where we're going to want to collect some dynamic data, right? We're asking the user, would you like help navigating this learning experience? Either yes or no. So we're going to need to know, do they have the navigation tutorials turned on or do they have them turned off? In that case, we are going to want to use a true or false variable. Okay, and let me just show you that too. So I'm going to go back into this project, the project variables. So I'll go back to this tab. And now when I create a new variable using this green plus sign, notice there's this type dropdown. Okay, so we can give our variable a name, of course. We can give it a default value. So, by default it will be nothing, but we could make it like by default it could say hello, for example. We won't worry about that right now, but let's look at type. There are 3 types of variables that we can create in Storyline. Okay. It may be it's pretty intuitive by what they're called, but a true or false variable, this first one you see here, that variable can only be equal to true or false. It can't be equal to anything else. It can't be equal to nothing. It can't be equal to a number. Only true or false. Um, a text variable can include any kind of like alphanumeric data, like letters, numbers, spaces, apostrophes, whatever you want, kind of like any kind of text. And the number variables can only contain numbers. So no text at all, no letters, no symbols, only digits. Okay, so those are the 3 different types of variables. We're going to use all of them. Again, if the data we're trying to collect, it's like it's either this or this. It's only one of 2 possible options. The navigation is either or the navigation tips are either on or off. Then we use a true false variable. That makes sense, right? It either is or it isn't. So in this case, we'll name this variable. We'll call it is navigation or are tutorials on. Notice this naming structure. You have the freedom to name these whatever you'd like, but we want to make it fairly clear. Since we're using a true false variable, we want it to be kind of intuitive. So our tutorials on, if that's true, then yeah, tutorials are going to be on. If that's false, tutorials will be off. Okay. So that's my naming convention. And then this is called camel case. This is like from JavaScript. It's a naming convention people use for variables. So the first word is all lowercase, and then we go into like word case or whatever you would call this, where the first letter of each word is capitalized to like separate out the words. Okay. So the default value can be whatever we'd like. Either the navigation will be on by default or it will be off by default. Let's say that it is on by default. Okay. So we're creating this variable. Our tutorial is on or is, you know, it's good starting with a verb like that when you're using true or false variables. Okay. So we're going to keep them on by default and then we will press OK. So I'm going to press OK again to get out of this variable manager. And again, if we want to see the value of that, we can just create a text box. And I do that just by pressing Control T. It will create a text box wherever my cursor is. And then we can type a percentage sign and we can say R tutorials on. And then we'll type another percentage sign. We'll click out of it and we can see that that's true. But okay, so by default, we can see that this is true. But if someone selects this no thanks button, we are going to want to make that false, right? And you can see I already added some triggers. So when the user hovers over the no button, it changes to this hover state. And then when the user clicks the no button, it just jumps to the next slide. So that's all the programming we have so far. But we can adjust variables using triggers. Okay, so I'm going to click on this no thanks button. I'm going to create a new trigger. And the action in this case is going to be adjust variable. And it's the first option under this more subheading. You could also just start typing in like variable if you want, and or type in adjust, and it will make that the only option. Okay. So there we go. Our action is adjust the variable, and then you can see, we can change each of these things. We set is our only option for a text entry one, which is fine. But we don't want to adjust this text entry variable. We want to adjust this our tutorials on variable when the user clicks the no thanks button. So let's click on that variable and we want to set it to value false. Because if they're saying no thanks, they don't want the tutorials to be on. And we will do this when the user clicks the no button. Okay. So I'm going to press OK here. For anyone who's more savvy with storyline, can you foresee the problem we're going to have here? What I'm going to do is I'm going to create this. I'm just going to copy and paste this variable reference onto the next slide so that we can see the value when we get to the next slide. And let's preview this. Okay, I think Nicole's already onto it, but let's see. Okay, so the variable is true by default. When we press no thanks, it's going to run the following things. When we click on it, it's going to jump to the next slide, and it's going to try to make that variable change to false. Let's see when I click on this. It jumps to the next slide, but the variable is still true. Okay, and this comes up in many of the workshops we've done, but it's something to be very cognizant of when you're working in storyline. Trigger order is very, very important. Okay, when you have a trigger that jumps to the next slide, any other triggers after that are never going to get fired because storyline says, okay, jump to the next slide. And then once we're on the next slide, it just forgets about everything else that was after that. Okay, so these little arrows right here in the triggers interface, you can use these to change the order in which the triggers will fire. So we can select on this jump to next slide trigger and we can move it down. So now it sets that variable to false before jumping to the next slide. And now if we preview this, I'm going to preview this scene. But so now when we say no thanks, it sets it to false and then it jumps to the next slide. So now we can see that value is false. So a lot of people get tripped up there when they're working with variables. Even if you might have all of the programming right, but you just had the like order of operations wrong, so to speak. But just remember when storyline jumps to the next slide, any other triggers you had after that are never going to get fired. Kyle puts text in front of the variable so I know what is true or false. Yeah, good point. So when you're Kyle has a great point about when you're troubleshooting. So you should say like are tutorials on. So there we go. That's going to be much more clear. Now we can see which variable it is that we're actually changing. You see? Great tip, Kyle. Yeah, trigger order very important. So in this case, we don't really need to create another trigger to set the navigation. Or sorry, we don't need to create another trigger to set tutorials on to true when the user clicks this button, just because like they either turn it on or they don't. Um, like they're never going to be back in this slide for this example. If you want to, and maybe this is a homework assignment, try to try to make it so that when they click on yes, it sets tutorials to our tutorials onto true. And then maybe make the default value false instead of true. So if you want for homework, like do the inverse. But for now, we should be good because it's either going to be true because they never clicked no. If they click yes, we don't need to change it because it's already true. You see what I mean? But if they click no, then it changes it to false. So that will be fine. So we are good for now. What we're going to want to do with this now, though, and this is where conditions will come into play. So by default, if we look at like slide 2, for example, we have this little tutorial here, or tooltip, or instructions, whatever we want to call it. Notice that it's in a normal state. If we preview this slide, we will see that here. Okay. Um, so if we want to hide that when tutorials are off, does anyone have any idea what that trigger will look like? And if you're watching the replay, try to quiz yourself. What trigger will we create so that we don't see this if the user has said no thanks to the navigation tips? But I just want to show you. Here's where conditions will come into play. Yes, Brent. Okay, good. So we're going to create a new trigger on this slide where we're asking the user for their name. We're not going to adjust a variable. We need to change the state of something. Again, this isn't a states tutorial, but every object by default will have this hidden state. And now if it's hidden, it's like not going to display. Let me show you that. So all I did here is I changed the initial state of that to hidden, just to show you that that state exists within every object. I changed it back to normal, but what we can do now is create a new trigger so that we can change the state of that navigation text to hidden. Okay, so just let's focus on the action for now. So the action we're taking is we want to change the state of that navigation text to hidden. Now I'm going to show you a common mistake, or maybe let's see from you all or quiz yourself. When do we want to change the state of that to hidden? When what happens? Because Ali and Brent, you both say change the state of hidden when the variable is false. But let's look at our whens. So if I type in variable, I have this variable changes option. Is that what we want to use? Yes. When the timeline begins. So let me just say a quick disclaimer about this. If you do, okay, when the variable changes, our tutorial is on, the slide will only register the variable change if the variable changed while you are on this slide. Okay, so if we get to this slide and we say, okay, I changed the state of that when the variable changes, maybe we add a condition to it. This is never going to fire unless we change this variable while the user is on this specific slide. But since that variable changed on the previous slide, this would never fire. Okay, so hopefully that's clear. Feel free to ask more questions about that. But we want to do it when the timeline starts on this slide. Okay, but now we're missing something, right? Because now every single time the timeline starts on this slide, we're going to change the state of this to hidden. We're never going to see it, even if our tutorials are turned on. Okay, yes, Susan. So now you're getting into the conditions. When the timeline begins, if the variable is false, and that is where these optional conditions come into play. We can create conditions based on the states of objects, or in our case, which is what we're going to be doing here, the values of different variables. Okay, so we want to say, yes, we will do this. We will change the state of that text to hidden when the timeline starts if this variable right here, our tutorials on, is equal to false. Okay, so this is the trigger we need here. That is how you use conditions. We don't want to execute this unless that variable is false. If that variable is true, this will never get fired and we will still see the text there. Okay, so we can preview this now. I can show you it again later if you need to, but hopefully, I mean, it seems like you all are following along. I'm seeing some thumbs up on the screen, but let's preview this now. Okay, would you like help navigating this learning experience? Let's say yes, please. And now you see we have our navigation text. I'm going to replay this scene now. If we say no thanks, you see now because that variable is false, that trigger said, okay, yes, the variable is false. Let's execute this now. Let's change the state of that navigation text to hidden when the timeline starts, and now it's gone. So that's how we can use variables and conditions in combination to personalize the learning experience. Okay, at least with true false variables. We're going to look at some other ways to do this too. I'm going to get rid of these variable references we have here since we already saw that that worked and we don't want to crowd up the screen. Layla, what would be the benefit of setting it to true? So when we're clicking this, right now there's not a real benefit, but imagine in a learning experience where you had an example where you had an option to like return to this slide, like maybe there's a UI element to like adjust settings, and then you want to change it um back to turning those tutorials on. You would want to make it so that this one sets it to true. And again, it will be very, very similar. It's just this same trigger right here, but instead of changing it to false, it would change it to true. So in this project, we don't need it because we're never coming back to this slide unless we like restart the whole experience. And when you restart a course, all of the variables are reset to their initial state. So that will be important to remember too when you're working with variables. And what I mean by that is like if you're ever using this like restart course trigger right here, it will reset all of the variables back to their default values. Does storyline crash when you click on objects in the conditions page? I haven't had many issues with storyline crashing in the objects and variables and conditions. Like I haven't had many crashing issues with this, so I'm not sure if you should do a reinstall there. Rachel, is that always true? Whatever happens in the trigger wizard, the corresponding reaction will only happen if it happens on that slide, regardless of the trigger. Um, that's a good question. So for the when, yeah, I think that's a good question. All of these whens, yeah, that's like a broader generalization for people who are learning storyline. If you're monitoring the when for one of these triggers, like, yeah, you want to take some kind of action, but when do you take it? All of these triggers are limited to this specific slide. You can't say, oh, when the media completes on some other slide or when the dial turns on another slide. Each slide is kind of its own encapsulated um, yeah, its own self-contained little experience basically is one way to think about it. The way where it's not self-contained, which is very relevant to what we're doing here, is when you're using variables and conditions. Variables persist throughout the entire project, which is why we're able to do stuff like this. A choice that someone took on slide 1 is able to impact what they see on slide 2, slide 3, slide 4 because variables persist throughout the entire learning experience. Okay, so good question. If we need to communicate data from one slide to another, that's where variables come into play. A question from Trisha. As a way around variables, could it just be a branching scenario and duplicate slides? More work, obviously. Yeah, Trisha. I mean, that way you're like not using variables, but it's kind of to your own detriment because you'll be spending more time. So it's more work up front, getting comfortable with variables and learning how to use them, but it can save you many, many hours down the line just so that you don't have to create as many triggers or as many duplicate versions of slides. It'll be smaller file sizes for your audience if you're not duplicating slides a bunch. Um, but good question for sure. Some other variable types. So this one, what's your name? This one should be very easy for us. We can type whatever text we want in this text entry box, and then we can display it. Okay, so let me show you something. We're going to open the variable manager. And again, by default, whenever you add one of these text entry boxes, let me just show you. I'll add another one. So from the insert tab, we'll go to input, and then I'll add another text entry field. I'm going to go to the variable manager now and see it added another text entry one variable. And like it'll just keep adding numbers after unless you change the name of the first ones. So I'm going to get rid of this. And when I delete that text entry box, notice the variable gets deleted along with it. Okay, so some things that you add in storyline, like when you add sliders or dials, for example, they will have like built-in variables that come along with them because their functionality depends on those variables. What we can do though to keep our project more organized is we can rename these default named variables. So instead of text entry, I'm going to just call this name, or we can say like username or whatever you'd like. I'm just going to call this one name, and then we'll press OK. Okay, so we renamed the variable that came with this. And how this works is whatever the user enters here, whenever this loses focus, which means whenever they like click out of it or like tab out of it and like it loses focus from the final project, it's going to set whatever they typed here equal to that variable. Okay, so if I type in Devlin and then click out of that box, it's going to set the name variable equal to value Devlin. All right, so quick question. This should be an easy one for everyone here. If we want to actually show the user's name here, because notice right now it's just going to say thanks name. It's kind of like a placeholder. If we want to show the user's name here, what do we do? All right, we want to make it more personalized. We want to say their name. How do we go ahead and do that? How do we show whatever they enter in this box? How do we display that here? That is the question. Yes, we just need to add those percentage signs. And someone suggested Oline Gia. suggested using text entry, but remember we changed the name of that variable, so we actually just do it around name. Okay, so it needs to be exactly whatever you have here, and the capitalization needs to be exactly the same too. So all we have to do is this, right? We just add those around it. I'm going to click out of it. It tells us the name of the variable, and then if we preview this scene, should be nice and straightforward. No thanks. My name is Dev. Thanks, Dev. So there we go. Very, very easy display. Maybe we should have started with that one. But you can imagine now where, and I didn't do this, maybe we leave this for homework. I'll let you all decide. But do we want to see, imagine if someone tries to continue without entering any name there. Should we look at how we can use conditions to go ahead and not let them continue if that's the case? So watch, if I press submit, it's asking me my name. I'm just going to press submit, and then it lets me continue. And it's like, thanks, space. I'm not a space bar. I'm a person. So we need to go ahead and not let that happen. So let's build this trigger together. I'm going to add some text here. I'm going to say, please enter your name before continuing. Okay. So here we go. This is going to be like some conditional text. I'm going to make it size 22. Doesn't need to look super pretty, but I'm just going to make this hidden by default. Okay, so I made a text box. You can do this when you're following along. I'm just going to preview it now just to show you we're not going to see anything here. But what I want to happen is if they press submit without entering their name, I want that. I don't want them to jump to the next slide. And I want that text box to appear and say, hey, put this in before continuing. And you know what? We can make this text red too. So first, let's handle like not letting them continue, right? So you can see we have this trigger right here. When the user clicks the submit button, jump to the next slide. What do we need to do here? I think Oline Gia already said set condition not equal to blank. So conditions, if we click on this, we want to say if name, and notice we can click on this equal sign operator, and we have different options. Okay, so if we want to say if it's not equal to blank, and there we go. And we could type in value. Like if you want to have like if you want to build some custom text entry questions and you and like if the user doesn't enter like one of these values, like you could say if name is equal or if like response is equal to like, you know, whatever the user should be entering in there, you can set conditions and then give the user points if they type in the right thing or like not. We can build an interaction like that if you want. I'll just wait till the end. Don't want to confuse you more. I'm getting ahead of myself. But if the name is not equal to blank, then jump to the next slide. Okay, that makes sense. So we do want to jump to the next slide when the user clicks the submit button, but only if that name variable is not blank. If it is blank, we know that the user didn't enter anything and we don't want to bring them to the next slide. Okay, so we will press OK there. And then we'll create another trigger. And what does this one need to be? Because this one we want to show the text whenever they click it if it is blank. Right? So we want to change the state of that submit of this text box down here. Yeah, change state of text box 1. That's that one I just added. I should have named it, but it's okay. Change state of text box 1 to normal. What's the when? What do I make the when here? Is it when the timeline starts? When the user clicks submit? Yep. When the user clicks the submit button if name is blank. Exactly. Good. I see you all saying that in the chat. If name is value blank. Okay, so you see how a lot of this is like thinking through this. So sometimes writing it down on paper first can help. Just because it's like, what am I exactly trying to accomplish here with the variables and conditions? If you just get in here and start like just entering conditions, it's going to be confusing. But if you can explain like just in plain words what you're trying to do before actually executing it, it will make things much easier. So we want to make that text box appear when the user clicks the submit button if the name value is blank. Okay, so let's try it. I'm going to preview this scene. And let's say I'm like, I just want to get through this. I don't even care what's going on. I'm going to press submit. I'm going to move along. Actually, no, I am not because the programmer here set up those variables and conditions to stop me from advancing before I enter my name. See, I'm spam clicking this. Nothing happens. It showed me the text. Now I can type in my name and then press submit, and it brings me right along. Okay, so you see how we did that? That's how we use the combo of variables and conditions to not just, I mean, I guess personalize the experience, but also We can give them a more dynamic experience based on the user's input and actions. Okay. So we're just going to do one more quick example here just so you can see how we can use number variables. It is very, very similar to the other ones, but we are asking the person how confident they are with variables. So notice whenever they click on one of these buttons, all we do is we change the hover state whenever they hover over it. So when they hover over one of these buttons, it changes it to blue. And when they click on it, all it does is bring them to the next slide. All right, so what I want to do is I want to actually adjust the variable. Well, we need to create a new variable. So I'm going to go to the project manage project variables button up here in the top right. This is the variable manager. I'm going to create a new variable by pressing this green plus sign, and we will name this one confidence level. Okay, and the type of variable will be a number variable. And the default value can be 0. That's fine. It's going to have to be something for them to advance. So this one is a number variable, and it can only be equal to values. You can also make it a random number between 2 digits, but that's not what we need here. But again, it can only hold digits. So we'll make this a number variable. We will press OK here to get out of the variable manager. And now I'm going to create a new trigger for each one of these buttons. So I'm going to click on the one button, create a new trigger, and then the action will be adjust variable. We are going to set confidence level equal to value 1 whenever the user clicks the one button, right? Notice though, whenever you're working with number variables, you'll have some different options. So if you click on set, you'll see you have some of these like mathematical operations that you can perform. So you can add variables to different variables. You can subtract numbers from variables. You can do all sorts of things with number variables that you cannot do with other variables. So keep that in mind. You can build like calculators with this even. It would be complex, but it's possible. High math, yes. So we're not getting into this unless you'd like to after we just cover this. But this is all I'm going to set up. So a very simple one. We're just setting the variable. Important thing we need to do. Tell me what we need to do. I'm just going to copy and paste this onto each one of these. And then I'm going to adjust the value to 2 when they click the 2 button. And notice the workflow. So with that trigger highlighted, I'm going to press the copy the selected trigger button. Then I'm going to click on a new one of these buttons, so the 3 button, for example, and then I select the paste the copied trigger button. So I'm going to paste it, and now it just puts that same one on this new button. But instead of setting the confidence level to 2 when they click the 3 button, I need to set the confidence level to 3. So that's all I'm doing here, but we are going to need to adjust this. I added this trigger to each one of these now. We call this the copy, paste, and replace method. We built it once, now we just copy, paste it, and replace the key details instead of creating the trigger from scratch 5 different times. But this isn't going to work. Does anyone remember why? The order, exactly. So notice, just like we talked about earlier, when the user clicks any of these buttons, the first thing it does is jump to the next slide, so that variable is never going to get set. So for each of these, we have to click on the set confidence level trigger and move it up to the top of the trigger order. So here we go. And you could do the inverse too. We can click on the jump to the next slide one and move it down. So I'm just going back through each one of these and making sure that the variable is set before we jump to the next slide. If there are any questions about that, feel free to ask them in the chat. And for those of you that are following along, please help answer those questions. Cool, but we don't want anyone to get left behind here. So there we go. So now we have that confidence level set. We could demo it. Like let's do a variable reference on this slide. Confidence level. I don't know if I would recommend doing that. I feel like that could lead into some problems when we're working with JavaScript and storyline variables. So try to keep it case sensitive to be safe, but it looks like storyline is a bit more forgiving than JavaScript. So very cool, very cool. And what we're going to do now is I just wanted to show that again that, based on this this choice that the user selects on this slide, further down the line, like we could have just said, okay, yeah, when the user clicks on 1, 2, or 3, go to like the review question. When the user clicks on 4 or 5, go to the tough question. But there will be cases when you're doing storyline development where there will be questions earlier in the learning experience and choices that they make, and you want to affect some things that they see 10, 15 slides later, that's where you'll use this kind of programming technique. So you can store how they answered a question in a variable, and then later on, you can jump to a slide conditionally based on that variable. So this will only take a couple more minutes if you followed along so far. We want this to happen. So when we click on I am ready, we want to jump to the tough question if they have selected 4 or 5 for their confidence, and we want to jump to the review question if they have selected 1, 2, or 3. If we are going to have 2 different options, so maybe they'll go to this slide, maybe they'll go to another slide, we're going to need 2 different triggers. We're going to need to build out the programming for each one of those slides. So let's first do the tough question one, maybe. So we want to jump to slide. We want to jump to slide uh, tough question. When the user clicks the ready button, what conditions do we have here? So just for you all to get some practice quiz yourselves, we want to jump to the slide tough question when the user clicks the ready button, if what? hmm Okay, if confidence level equals 4 or 5, you could do it that way. You could do like if confidence level is equal to value 4 or level is equal to value 5. This wouldn't work because this is saying if it's equal to 4 and 5 simultaneously, and that will never be the case. It can only hold one value. So we could change that and to an or. So notice you can change that. Now it's like if this is true or if this is true, then it will execute that action when the user clicks that button. Yes, see the so what we can do to keep this even more clean is we can use mathematical operators. So we can click on that equal sign and notice with number variables we have more options here. It's not just like equal to ignore case, not equal to, or not equal to ignore case. We also have greater than, less than, all of these things. So we can say if it's greater than or equal to 4. So we just have one condition. If it's equal to 4, it fires. If it's greater than 4, it fires. That is exactly what we need. Okay. So we will, and we could also do greater than 3. We obviously have different options here. We could do like if it's between 2 values, you see. So we have different options, but this one will be just fine. We need to create another trigger now. So now we need to do it for the review question. So jump to the review question when the user clicks the ready button. If confidence level, we just do the inverse now. So we can do if it's less than 4. We can do if it's less than or equal to 3. Let's just do that. And that is how we do it. So this should work just fine. And now notice in our scene view over here, notice we can see like the branching is kind of handled for us. Okay, so let's preview the entire project and see that this works. So we will turn off the navigation. Oh, and we didn't set up the variable. Maybe that's homework for you to show this conditionally as well. If you want to, yeah, because we turned off navigation, we shouldn't see the navigation on any of the slides. So if you want to get some practice doing that, try doing that on these other slides. How confident are you with variables? How confident are we feeling? Someone throw a number in the chat. Are we feeling good? We're feeling 4, 3. Okay, 4 is the first one I saw. 5. Okay, we got some 5s. That's nice. Okay, so our confidence level is 4. We should see the tough question. Yes, we did. And now let's go back. Oh yeah, I can't just skip along. So now let's say our confidence is 3. We should see the review question, and we do. Okay, and then so on and so forth. Like that will be the same throughout. If it's 1, we will see the review question. If it's 5, we will see the tough question. So there we have it. Question from Kyle: is there a way to display backlog text entries that a learner put in a data field? Um, Other than the way we showed, Kyle? Like if like just showing, we enter. Let's see. So yeah, like enter some text in this uh, data entry, and then on the next slide, just displaying it. So that would be text entry. Other than that approach, Kyle, because that should work. Okay, Ruth, here you are. You are here. Okay, so Ruth has a tough one for us that I think that we might have covered or danced around in some other videos, but the question is, how do you make a button show as visited when you go back to that slide? Okay, Ruth, we're gonna try to help you out with this. We have some time. Let's do this, and let's see if the rest of the chat wants to follow along and get some practice with us. Okay, so I'm gonna say we're gonna name this scene Ruth question. I think I'm gonna add your question in a text box over here, Ruth. Okay, so here is Ruth's question. How do you make a button show as visited? So I'm gonna add a button, or I'm just gonna add a shape, and we're gonna create a visited state. So notice I use custom states again. I really recommend staying away from the default one. So we'll make it gray to signify that it's been visited. Okay, so we've done that. How do we make it show as visited when you go back to that slide, but the animation of that slide should not play again when you return to that slide? So is the button animated, Ruth? So let's say the button animates in. So the button animates in over 0.75 seconds. Oh, yes, it does. Okay. So here's what we have. We have a slide with this is going to represent a button and it animates in. Let's make the animation a bit more drastic so that we can we'll just make it floating so we can see that it's animating better. So I imagine Ruth is building a project where you click on a button, where we have a series of buttons. You click on one of those buttons, and then it brings you to like this is a slide. It brings you to some kind of slide or interaction, and then you return to this like menu screen, and we want this button to show in the visited state, but we don't want it to reanimate in. I'm guessing that's what we're working with, Ruth. We have a, and we do, this is very similar to a project in the project lab. I think it's actually exactly that. Project 4 for those of you who are in there. But let's see. So this is a slide, and then we're just gonna add a little rectangle to like return back to that slide. So jump to slide 3.1 when the user clicks this, and then when they click on this one, we're going to jump to slide. I mean, it's next slide, but we'll just to avoid any possible issues, jump to slide 3.2. Okay, let's preview this scene. So here we are. We click on this button. It brings us to this. We click on it here, and the slide resets itself, right? It animates in. So here's what we're going to do, Ruth. We're going to create a variable to know that we visited 3.2. Or like, we'll just create a new variable, call it like viewed slide. And your variables will look different. We'll just make it a true or false variable. By default, we have not viewed that slide, so it will be false. Okay. On this slide, so once they get to this slide, we know that they viewed it. Once they get to 3.2, so we're going to adjust the variable, and we are going to set viewed slide to true when the timeline starts on this slide. So we know when they get here, they viewed it, so we set that to true. Now, when we get back to this slide, we want two things to happen, right? And this is what I mean. We talk this stuff out just in plain English before trying to add any of the programming so we know exactly what we need to do. So we need two things to happen here. We want that animation not to occur. So we have this 0.75-second animation. We don't want that to happen, but we do want this to be in the visited state. So those are the two things we want to happen. So I'm going to create a new trigger, and I'm going to say change the state of rectangle 1 to visited state when the timeline starts on this rectangle if, and here's where conditions come into play, if viewed slide is equal to true. Okay? Because that will only be the case after they viewed that slide 3.2. So we're using the same stuff we learned in this session. So I'm going to preview this now. Let's see where we're at with this. Okay, so it animates in, it's not viewed. I click on this, we see this slide. As soon as we landed here, that variable would be set to true. Now when we click on this, it brings us back. It is in the visited state, but we still have that animation. So does anyone have any suggestions? Does anyone want to try to answer this? How do we make sure that that animation doesn't happen? Let's see if you have any ideas. And if you're watching YouTube, try to quiz yourself. Best way to learn is by practice and trying to work through some of these problems on your own. So let's see what we can do together. how do we keep it in that visited state, but not have it animate in once this slide has been viewed? Okay, no ideas. One idea, which people may be tempted to do, is to go into these layer options here and say when revisiting, we want to reset to or we want to resume the save state, right? Because it would have already animated in, so we'll just resume the save state. The problem with that, okay, is we have this trigger that's changing the rectangle to the visited state. We have that happening when the timeline starts. Okay, so if we resume the save state when we return to that slide, the timeline is just going to be wherever it was when you left it. So if you sit on this slide for 5 seconds and then click on it and it brings you here, and then click on it and it brings you back, when you resume save state, the timeline will still be right here. So it's never going to go back to the beginning, which means it will never trigger that visited state. Let me just show you what I mean by that. These are good kind of things to work through just to get a better handle on how storyline works. So it animates in, we click on this, that variable changes to true. We go back, it doesn't animate in now because the timeline is further ahead, fine. But it also doesn't change to the visited state because the timeline didn't start again. The timeline was wherever we left it, like somewhere around here. Okay, so I'm going to change that back and we are going to reset to initial state. We're going to use a trigger. So maybe the reason this was confusing is just because we haven't really covered animations, but animations are tied to the timeline very closely. So over this 0.75 seconds, that's basically saying from here to here on the timeline, that object will be animating in. So we can create a trigger to, I don't know, are you all chatting? Oh wait, I think I've just been like not seeing the chat. So sorry, you all. I thought it was just like super silent, but I think the platform is just like acting up a bit. So what we need to do is we need to create a trigger to jump to a time or cue point on the timeline. Okay. So we want to jump to the time 0.75 seconds on this slide when the timeline starts on this slide if um if view slide is equal to true. Okay, so you see how we did that? I basically just skipped that animation. So I'm saying skip over that animation completely when the timeline starts if we've already viewed this slide over here that we needed to view. Okay, and then you, of course, have the option to continue playing the timeline after that. In our case, it doesn't really matter because nothing happens after. But if you have that off, it's going to be paused after it jumps. So now if we preview this, it should work exactly as we want it to. All right, so it animates in. We click on this, it goes here. The variable is changed. We click on it. It's a visited state and it does not animate in. So that is how we do it. Um, but yeah, that one is tricky because it takes a really solid understanding of how like the animations work with the timeline and just knowing that jump to time trigger exists. Can you do something similar by having a marker or cue point? Yeah, it's just an extra step. We could have created like create a cue point at playhead. Well, we can move that around. And then we could say instead of jumping to the time, we could say jump to sorry, click on time. We could change that to cue point one. But it's the same kind of thing. It's just like, yeah, we can move that around easier. Um, Same kind of thing, just an extra step. Good question, Nicole. I'm gonna go back onto camera. All right, it looks like we are all through the questions. Again, if you want more practice, plenty more workshops on YouTube. I don't know how many we're up to now. There's like a playlist though. I'm going to try to order it in a way that will be like most beginner friendly to like least beginner friendly. And then also if any of you want to join us in the project lab, you can go to um, devinpeck.com/storyline hyphen project hyphen lab. Um, we'd love to see you all in there, but it is a paid program. It's kind of expensive. It's like $1,000 basically. So can definitely learn for free. But if it's in the budget and it makes sense for you, happy to see you in there. If not, I'll see you all on YouTube, and we'll be back next week with the one and only Kathy Moore. So that's going to be a good session. And we have plenty of other live stuff going on in here too. But Kathy Moore session next week, she's going to get into her experience creating info dumps in the past and how she created action mapping in the first place. So it's going to be a good one. I will see you all soon, and thanks for hanging out here with me today. Talk to you all later. Bye bye.